Hi, a very warm welcome to everyone who is joining us today from all parts of the world for this webinar. My name is Rui Almeida. I'm the chairman of the British Portuguese Chamber of Commerce. And today we will be talking about emerging questions for anyone thinking about planning to relocate to Portugal. In 2019, for the third time in a row, Portugal was elected the world's leading destination by the World Travel Awards. In 2020, Lisbon was awarded the world's leading city break destination. If you are thinking about making a fresh start somewhere now, in somewhere new, and more so if Portugal has made it onto your list as a place you might potentially want to relocate, then this webinar is surely most suited for you. Indeed, Portugal is surely a great place to look at if you're thinking of relocating somewhere, as it ticks most of the right boxes. In 2020, Portugal came third in a ranking of expat locations by Internations, and it's been getting much buzz among digital nomads as well. In terms of safety and stability, Portugal has been ranked third in the Global Peace Index, just below New Zealand and Iceland, and above the likes of Austria, Denmark, and Canada. Of course, like any other country, Portugal is not just about rainbows and butterflies. And therefore, you should always review what your objectives are and see how the country might fit with your expectations. Things that you might consider is the cost of living, applicable taxes, politics and culture, the economy and the thriving sectors, healthcare and insurances, and other practical considerations as well. To talk us through some of these issues and others which I did not previously mention, we have here a very strong panel of professionals and experts working on these fields, namely Aline Almeida. Aline is the associate partner of private tax and global employer services at Deloitte. Welcome, Aline. We also have Jorge Costa Martins. Jorge is a founding partner of CTSU, the Deloitte's legal practice in Portugal. Welcome, Jorge. We also have Pedro Henriques. Pedro is the founder and CEO of Bridging. Bridging helps companies to set up their tech businesses and to hire talent in Portugal. Welcome, Pedro. And last but not least, we have DIOGO Marques, who is the CEO of Grupo Marques Seguros, an insurance brokerage with a very thorough coverage. So all things considered, Portugal has a lot to offer to immigrants and temporary residents. So it's easy to see why it's gotten on the radar in recent years. Although there can be challenges in moving to a new country, Portugal is no doubt a fantastic place to live, work, or simply visit. We would urge you to raise your questions on the Q&A session in the chat within the platform of Zoom, and we will go through a Q&A session after the 10 to 15 minutes presentations we will have from our speakers, to whom I ask to respect as much as possible this time frame. But now we know that today's audience, we have a very diverse range of participants, many of whom have declared their interest in moving to Portugal. I think we had more than 100 participants enrolled for this webinar, so it's quite impressive and coming from all sorts of countries, all continents. So as the webinar will be limited to approximately 1 hour, there are many topics we will just not be able to cover or to touch upon. And so for those of you who need further information on such areas, such as international schools, real estate, removals, accountancy, visas, vehicle registration, healthcare, or similar, we encourage you to visit the Chamber's online directory of members on bpcc.pt/members directory, where you can do a filtered search based on the area of activity or geographic location which you're looking for. Also, companies or individuals interested in considering applying to membership to BPCC should consult our bpcc.pt/membership fees webpage. Both links will be posted in the chat. So now, without much further ado, I would hand over to Aline Almeida, who will walk us through the rounds of individual taxation, and in particular through the NHR, non-habitual residence regime, the Portuguese special regime for inbounds. Aline, over to you.
Thank you, Rui. Good morning to everyone, and thank you for this invitation. Let me just share the presentation. I think it's on already.
Yes,
yes. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I will briefly, and I emphasize the briefly description of the non-habitual resident regime. As it seems quite straightforward, but it does have a series of complexities. So first of all, trying to break some myths about the regime and why is it so special. Well, first of all, and to clarify and have a split between what I will explain and what Jorge Costa Martins will describe later on. The non-habitual resident regime is a tax regime. So it doesn't have any connection with immigration. So we do have two very renowned and well-known programs in Portugal, but one is for tax purposes and personal income tax purposes only, and another one is for immigration purposes. So the non-habitual resident regime, and one of the reasons for its success is because it applies to all nationalities. It may enable, in certain situations, the possibility of having no taxation in Portugal on foreign source income. It applies for 10 years, and the regime has been quite stable throughout the years. So the regime, for those who are not aware, so it was implemented in 2009. It has been approved by Troika. It has has the consensus of different political parties in Portugal, different governments, and after an evaluation upon the 10th birthday of the regime, the government clearly concluded that the intention is to continue with the regime. So although this is a political decision, so all tax decisions are driven by political decisions, but there is a climate that leads us to believe that the governments will continue to keep the regime throughout the years. Now, the regime has been quite successful. It could be more. So we've had so far roughly 52,000 people enrolled with the program. And looking at the official statistics for last year, so the UK has been one of the countries that has been quite popular in joining the regime. These numbers actually show one of the features of the regime is that it is not specifically targeted for foreigners. It also applies to Portuguese nationals that have lived abroad and that and for that reason became eligible for the regime. So who does indeed qualify for the regime? So one thing to bear in mind is that the main purpose of the regime is to attract people to move to Portugal. Okay, so it was created as a way to waive taxation, so personal income tax only, not other taxes, just personal income tax in specific circumstances. And it will apply for those that become tax residents in Portugal. So the first condition really is to become tax resident in Portugal. And for that, you need to stay either for 183 days in Portugal, at least. They don't have to be consecutive. So it can be throughout any period of 12 months. And if you do not meet this threshold for any reason, if you have a permanent residence in Portugal, so it could be a rented apartment, it can be your own house property that you buy. So as long as you have a permanent abode in Portugal, you will also qualify as a Portuguese tax resident. Now, this is strictly from a Portuguese tax perspective. It is important to ensure that wherever you are currently resident, if you move to Portugal, you do qualify as non-resident in your country, in your country of source, your original country. So from a Portuguese tax perspective, it is quite straightforward, and it is easily possible to become tax resident, but sometimes it is a bit more tricky to ensure that you break residency in your country of residence. So please ensure that you also seek advice when leaving your country, because if it is a country with which Portugal has a double tax treaty in force, being tax resident in Portugal might not be sufficient to qualify only as resident in Portugal. So international articulation of international taxation is really critical. So going back, first and most important residence criteria to become Portuguese tax resident, and second, not to have qualified as tax resident in Portugal in the 5 years prior to your relocation. So to give you an example, if you decide to move to Portugal this year, during the last 5 calendar years, and not just well, birthday years, so 5 calendar years, you cannot have been tax resident in Portugal. So if you meet these 2 requirements, then you are eligible for the non-habitual resident regime. So one thing that is important to bear in mind is that if you are a non-habitual resident, you are tax resident in Portugal for all purposes. Okay, so it has, for instance, the upside that it is possible to obtain tax residency certificates in Portugal, and that the Portuguese authorities will always certify that you're tax resident in Portugal, which might be important for certain types of income obtained abroad, and to confirm to the tax authorities in the country of residence that you are indeed tax resident in Portugal. But it means that for any Portuguese source income, you are taxed as any other ordinary resident in Portugal. It also means that you have to file annual income tax returns. So you must disclose your worldwide income in Portugal, and you need to tick the right boxes to ensure that the NHR regime is indeed applicable on foreign source income or other income that might have a special tax rate. And there are specific rates and flat rates in Portugal for income which is not exempt, or which is, for instance, sourced from tax havens. So we'll get in more detail about this, but the main idea is that you are always tax resident in Portugal, and ultimately you may still have 53% tax in Portugal. So how can we prevent this from happening? Now, one of the ideas or common ideas is that non-habitual residents do not pay any tax in Portugal. That is not true, as you can see from this table. So you have many oranges and reds, but I would like to focus more on the green dots here. One thing to bear in mind is that before moving to Portugal, it is important to map the potential revenue that you may have in the next 10 years. I know that this might be a difficult exercise, but it is important that you plan as much as possible before actually taking the step of moving to Portugal, because it is possible to restructure the holding structure, to restructure the income flow so that one may fit into the types of income that can be potentially exempt in Portugal. So first note, income from tax havens, so income that is paid by entities located or resident in tax havens, cannot generically benefit from the exemption in Portugal. So this is really important when we're looking at portfolios and sometimes, well, assets that, or company structures that have a holding company or even an operational company in a tax haven jurisdiction. So it is always important to address this to ensure that, well, first of all, to check if it is possible to adjust in order to benefit from the exemption, or if eventually the decision might have to be reconsidered. From our experience, it is generically possible to restructure the income flow or the structure of holdings to tailor it to benefit from the non-habitual resident regime, but it must be addressed always on a case-by-case basis. The second idea that I would like to focus here regarding taxation of non-habitual residents is that there is a special tax rate for employment and self-employment income. So if you have income that may fit what we call a high value-added activity list, so it is a list that is published by the government, which indicates areas in which we have shortage of know-how or people operating in certain sectors or activities. So if you are in one of those activities, then you can benefit from a special tax rate of 20% in Portugal. So this does not mean, for instance, that no Social Security will be due. Social Security rules are well, separate from tax rules, and depending on the situation, so Social Security contributions might still be due in Portugal, or it might be possible to continue paying in the country of source. So again, it is also a case where a specific analysis for each person must be carried out. Secondly, regarding foreign source employment income, it is possible to be exempt in Portugal. So it does require effective taxation at source. So if, for instance, one has a board membership position, or if you have a work that requires you to travel to another country and to work in that specific country, that income will be most likely taxed in that country. And in that case, it can be exempt in Portugal. Generically, self-employment income, well, it is quite unlikely that it will benefit from the exemption in Portugal, because it does require to have a permanent establishment in the country of source. So there are only very few cases where this applies. So best case scenario for self-employment income is really to benefit from the 20% rate, or ultimately it will have the 53% rate. So if you are considering moving to Portugal as a self-employee, it is critical to understand what might be better, to be self-employed or to eventually set up a company in Portugal through which you would carry out your activity. So this is usually one analysis that is quite important to address. Regarding dividends and interest, usually these are automatically exempt if they're not sourced from a tax haven. So these types of income do not require effective taxation. So as long as treaties or the OECD Model Tax Convention allows them to be taxed at source, they are exempt in Portugal. Now, what I would like now to focus on is other investment income and capital gains. Now, these two are probably the most tricky part of the income qualification and taxation. So to give you an example, in Portugal, the income distributed by participation units, it is not seen as a dividend. It is seen as other investment income, which means that for most treaties, it will not fall into the dividend rule. So in practice, the distributions that are made from participation units will qualify as other investment income, and thus will be taxable in Portugal at the normal rates applicable to investment income, which are, as a rule, 28%. The same applies to capital gains. So the treaty rules usually determine that only the country of residence has taxation rights over capital gains. Now, there are treaties that have very specific rules around capital gains that might allow the country of source to retain taxation rights, but they are clearly an exception. So as a rule, capital gains from financial assets, shares, bonds, participation units, derivatives, etc., will be taxable in Portugal, also at a 28% rate. So the most straightforward types of income will be also then any income derived from real estate. So if you have rental income abroad, or if you have a capital gains from the sale of a property outside Portugal, these two types of income are also always exempt. And for pensions, just one final note. We've had, I would say, the only and most relevant change in the regime throughout its 11 years of existence on the taxation of pensions. So the regime that we had in Portugal granted almost all cases a full exemption on pensions, and this was subject to some criticism by many countries. So the government last year introduced a special tax rate of 10% on pensions. So this means in practice that all those that moved to Portugal and became tax residents until the 31st of March 2020 were still eligible for the old regime, where you can have a full exemption in Portugal on pensions. And those that became tax residents after the 1st of April 2020, so when the Portuguese state budget entered into force, now are mandatorily covered by this flat rate of 10%. So this means that if you have a pension, if that pension for any reason is taxable in the country of source, you can always offset the tax paid at source against your tax due in Portugal. So it might be the case that you won't be paying any additional tax on pensions in Portugal. But if your pension is not taxable at all in the country of source, you will have a 10% rate on pensions. So in a very direct and straightforward way, this is what you can expect in terms of taxes if you become a non-habitual resident, both on foreign source and Portuguese source income. So as you can see, we can't really say that non-habitual residents don't pay any tax. There are a series of conditions for each type of income, so it's always important to address them very carefully.
Aline, I would urge you to wrap up, please. Sorry.
Yes. So yeah. Sorry. So finalizing, in terms of other taxes, and just to focus on this, we don't have wealth taxes in Portugal. There is no inheritance tax in Portugal. We do have stamp duty that may apply to gifts and inheritances, but for direct heirs, there is no stamp duty as a rule. Other taxes that might also be important to consider are municipal property taxes paid upon the acquisition and the maintenance of a property, and it will depend on the municipality and the value of the property. So really, to wrap up in a nutshell, it's always important to evaluate your specific situation to understand if, first of all, you are eligible for the regime and how you should adjust your situation to benefit as much as possible to the regime. And well, there are a series of formalities and bureaucracies that need to be complied with, but the main or the critical part is really on the planning. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Aline, for such brilliant talk on the intricacies of the Portuguese tax regime applicable to those who are planning to relocate to Portugal. Indeed, a lot to say in a very short period of time, but there you go. Well, we are a bilateral chamber, and obviously it seems inevitable that we always talk about Brexit, end up talking about Brexit in all of our webinars. And it is indeed a game changer in the relations between the UK and the EU. And I will now invite Jorge Costa Martins to delve upon the immigration highlights regarding Brexit and how it impacts moving to Portugal. Jorge, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone. It is a pleasure to be here and to share with you some of my experience in what regards the Golden Visa program. Let me just check what is, just having here some technical problems, sorry. just everything was okay until Aline. Sorry, just here having some problems. No, I think it is. Do you see my background yet?
No.
No. Okay. So, and now, can you see it?
Now, yes. Just if you could put it on full screen mode.
Okay. Okay. Brilliant. So, is it correct now?
Brilliant.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry for these technical problems. So, as mentioned, Rui, we are having several contacts regarding this Brexit situation, and mainly the clients want to know solutions and options to go through another programs that allows them to stay in Portugal or to go through the Schengen area. What I will try to in this periods, it is try to introduce yourself some of the options that we have. Nowadays, as you know, if any UK citizen wants to come to Portugal, and if he wants to stay until 90 days, he will not need to request any visa. However, if the period is higher, and we have several of our clients that needs to be for higher periods, the things are different, and they will need another kind of visa and residency permit for that purpose. What are the main options that they can apply? If they want to stay for less than 1 year, we can apply only for a temporary stay visa for special purposes that are here mentioned. If they want to stay for a year for periods of 1 year or more, that period, they will need also a residency permit. What are the main programs that they, the clients want to know and try to understand better and check if they can apply? One of them is, of course, the Golden Visa Program. This Golden Visa Program was created in 2012. It was, just 1 year after the NHR program. As Aline explained, and this is one of the most common questions that we have, this is different. We have the tax program, and we have this program for visa and residency permit for purposes. They are different, okay? This program is mainly focused in some kind of investments. The investment is should be maintained by a period of 5 years and should be through either individually or to Portuguese liability company incorporated in Portugal. Of course, the Portuguese or European Union citizens and EU nationals are not eligible for this golden visa process. So the UK citizens until the Brexit, and I had some contacts before of the Brexit, they will not be eligible, of course, for this program. Well, mainly, how does it work? Well, we have an initial application. Of course, first we have to do the investment. I will explain mainly the most common options for that. Then it is issued a residency permit. Is really a card that is valid for a period of 2 years. And then after 2 years, there's a second renewal for more two years. And then it is another renewal for until the 5 years of the program. After the 5 years, usually the clients want to apply either to the citizenship or to the permanent residence, okay? What are the main investments? And I'm going to explain you very quickly the two most common investments that we have. One of them is the real estate investment. Until the end of this year, the 500K, if you buy a property in all the Portuguese territory, will be eligible for this purpose. After 2022, things will be a little slightly different, and this investment of 500K will be only possible in some areas of low density areas, and it will be only possible also to another kind of not residential purposes, but for commercial or services purposes. So the real estate is not eligible as it is nowadays. So this is something important. If you want to decide to apply for this, you have until the end of this year to apply for this with no constraints. Another option that we have, and it is very common, it's the investment in funds. Since the COVID situation, we have been increasingly looked by clients that as they cannot travel, they wanted to invest in this. This is also going to change in 2022. The investment will not be 350K, but will go to 500K. But it's also an option. And as I mentioned before, this is the first step of any golden visa process. You do the investment either to the real estate or to the investment in funds. There are other investments, the capital investment, real estate for refurbishing, creation at least of 10 job positions. Well, they are here mentioned. I'm going to take a lot of time on them, but the real estate investment represents like 85 to 90% of the investments of the clients here in Portugal to this program. What are the main benefits for who invest in this program? The most important one is the visa waiver. Well, the visa exemption to go through all the Schengen area. They only need the applicants only need to stay to 7 days per year, or 14 days in the subsequent years, just to renew it. So it is it's not a very strong connection to the Portuguese territory. It is possible, some of our clients, they rent their real estate properties. It is a way of capitalizing some of the investment they are going to do. Of course, this is also possible to the family to apply for this program, and the family reunification is completely authorized. And at the end of the program, as I mentioned, it is possible either to apply for the Portuguese citizenship or to the permanent residency. It is very common, our clients, after the 5 years of the program, to apply for either of these one of these options. So the golden visa is mainly this. As I mentioned, it's first step is the investment. Then we need to go to a pre-approval. We present some documents, and then we have an appointment to collect the biometric data and to present other documentation. After the analysis of this, it is issued the residency permit that is valid for the period of 2 years. Other option that we have been also increased look by some of our clients is this visa D7. It is called like the residency authorization for people living out of individual revenue, or people as retired person that wants to fix themselves in Portugal. The first step of this process is, of course, the obtaining the visa in the consulate or in another entity that is VFS, that is subcontracted by the consulates, and this is the first step. That visa allows the applicant to come to Portugal and then to apply to the residency permit that is also valid for 2 years and renewable for the period of 3 years. Who can apply? Also, not nationals from EU member states. The main documents that are required to be presented either in the consulate or here in the Portuguese Immigration Office are the proof of means of subsistence, like bank statements, proof of the pension, all kinds of income that the applicant may have. And of course, the proof of accommodation here in Portugal that represents that they want to fix themselves here. The timelines are not very quick as we wanted to be, mainly because of this COVID situation. We have many delays on this, but if we have all the documentation, I think that in less than about 8 to 9 months, we can have all the process finished. Well, the main benefits are also the right to work, as in the case of the Golden Visa, the family reunification, and also the movement through all the Schengen area. There are here, differently from the Golden Visa program, that the applicant only needs to stay here 7 days per year, and he proves that with the plane tickets, receipts in Portugal. In this case of the Visa D7 and for the renewal of the residency permit, they are not allowed to be outside of Portugal for more than 6 consecutive months or 8 months in total for the period of each permit, the first permit for 2 years. Well, without justification, just to give you an idea, a professional justification is allowed for this purpose, and or for medical reasons, there are justifications that are allowed for these to justify this absence of the Portuguese territory. And finally, I'm going also to mention some of other option that some of our clients also look for and when they want to come to Portugal. These visa for independent workers are mainly for freelancers, entrepreneurs, independent contractors, and they also need to apply for this visa. The process also begins in the consulate. The consulate issues the visa, and then they should apply also for the residency permit. It is also issued for the period of 2 years, and it's renewable for more 3 years. Who can apply? There are also the non-EU member states. The documents that are required are mainly a contract with the service provider, certification of professional competences. Mainly those documents are the most appropriate for this purpose, and the timeline is more or less the same as the Visa D7. This visa is mainly for who wants to come to Portugal and establish themselves here, and they can well have this independent activity since our country. The benefits are mainly the same as the Visa D7. I'm not going to go through again, and the limits of absence are also the mentioned before. So these are mainly the 3 options that we have regarding these immigration routes, and well, I'll be available for any queries and questions that you may have regarding these or other doubts that you may have, and thank you for your patience to ring me, and thank you again.
George, thank you so much for shedding some light on the immigration rules and all procedures that must be observed by those outside the EU that plan to either visit, live or work in Portugal, and therefore also to all the UK nationals since Brexit. Much appreciated. As I said in the beginning, Portugal has been getting much buzz about among digital nomads. The combination of a large and growing existing tech ecosystem, attractive immigration policy, as we saw, political stability, high standards of living, among other reasons, have convinced a number of tech companies to move to Portugal. I will therefore ask now Pedro Henriques to do his presentation on how to manage a tech business in Portugal, as Bridgin specializes in setting up tech companies and also hiring talent in Portugal. Pedro, please tell us how Bridgin can do what you can do to help such tech businesses. Thank you very much.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Rui, and also thank you for the British Portuguese Chamber of Commerce for the invite, and also a pleasure to be in this panel of very distinguished contributors. So you should be seeing my screen already, hopefully.
We are indeed. Yeah.
All right. Brilliant. So obviously, well, Business Bridgin, and I will focus, and I'll also try to be brief. Obviously, all the information about tax and legal is very important for someone doing a relocation, but I'll try to focus more, first of all, on the tech side, right? What means if you are someone on the tech industry, or also if you either as, well, contributor, employee, or a business owner, and some interesting consideration more on the practical side of running a business. So, but first, a quick intro on Brigitte. I am myself, I have here my co-founder, also my head of sales, but we are very senior people. Myself, I have worked in the tech space for quite some time, including work on a private equity firm. So this comes, what you'll hear next comes from the experience of running tech businesses and sometimes doing it across borders, okay? Just so that obviously everyone understands, and also feel free to reach out after this. Quickly on the services, as Rui mentioned, we do help tech companies that want to expand mostly. Sometimes that comes with assisting some of the founders or owners to also relocate as well. We've seen that as a growing trend, definitely after December with Brexit, particularly from the UK. We were also seeing a lot, and I assume most of the audience here will be British, but we were also seeing a lot of this happening from the United States in the last quarter of the last year. I would assume, particularly for some civil unrest and you know, all the elections and all of that. But Portugal is indeed quite hot in terms of accommodating people and people that want to choose a different country to possibly live in. We can help from the soft landing, so assist more, you know, do the gritty work of do all the contracts, find what is the best city. So we call that soft landing. Some of our customers we've been helping as well with what is gaining popularity that is called employer of record, so that you don't need necessarily to create your subsidiary first and then hire. You can actually change that order, but also relocation and also assistance with payroll. That's only for Brigitte. Let's get into what matters here. So some of this we already mentioned. Why Portugal? And I just want to mention this in a different light, because again, the momentum we are seeing for Portugal and why we believe that Portugal might be very relevant, not just eventually for you as an individual, but more interesting for you potentially as a business owner or even someone that wants to start a business. So obviously Portugal, this has been said already, very safe country on all the ranking in the world, is also in terms of democracy, and unfortunately we have seen in other places in the world a rising autocracy. Portugal is still fairly good democracy, a liberal democracy, so that's good. We are happy with that. Hopefully it stays that way. Also, obviously these were, by the way, what you're seeing here were the previous travel direct flights from TAP. This is possibly not true anymore with, you know, all the restructuring in airliners, but Portugal indeed historically and geographically has always been very close to well, bridging between Europe, but also North America and Africa. So what we tell a lot is that that could be, you know, it's the last piece of land when you're leaving Europe and going to the other side of the pond, but also for other business people that might come from America, is the first piece of land, obviously, in European soil. So that's quite interesting and quite an interesting strategic decision. As you probably are aware, we have the exact same zone as the UK, which will be 1 hour closer to America than Central Europe, and obviously a little bit closer than Eastern Europe. Quality of living, also already quite discussed, I believe, today, but this has started to create, and we've seen this a lot in the last, well, 1.5 years now, which is people are relocating to Portugal. Why? Because when everyone got to work remotely, right? And so the work locations start to become somewhat agnostic. You don't need to go to commute to an office in London, in any other big city. People start, okay, why do I need to be paying for a huge expense? Paying a huge amount, but for a very small apartment or flat close to city center, right? So now I can move either more to the countryside or even abroad. Some people also went back to their home countries. So they were expats, so they decided to go back. And others actually decided to come to Portugal. We've seen that a lot. We see that from the UK. We see that from the Nordic countries. We see that from North America. And a lot of it, I believe, is due to quality of living. Also, cost of living in Portugal for Western Europe is very affordable. Obviously, if you go to other places, it might not be as much, but Western Europe definitely is. So what all of this pulls together is, by the way, English proficiency as well, very high. Other than the Nordics, English proficiency, you probably already know that. If you spend any time in Portugal, you recognize this. But this is important because other countries in Southern Europe do not have that. If you go to Spain, Italy, you'll find that their English skills are not as strong, at least, well, in English, obviously. But what these all have been combining is to bring more talented people. And obviously this combined with the golden visas, with the NHR that aim to get people back. A lot of Portuguese that went abroad when Troika was here. Now they can come back, right? So that brings a melting pot of different people, different experience, which make it very interesting to stay in the country. Together with that, very skilled workforce, okay? So what you can see here, a different amount of countries. Portugal is the 5th country in the world that spends more on education. Maybe a little bit of inefficiency also, but it's still quite relevant. And we do have a lot of graduates in STEM. So particularly with technology, we are fairly strong. And you see that here on the blue, Portugal ranks fairly high in terms of investment. A little bit less in appeal, you know, obviously UK, US have been having a little bit more appeal throughout the years, but Portugal has done its job to make the conditions to have a very good, talented people to add to obviously everyone that is choosing Portugal to live on. Obviously, you'll see this. So this is just a quote, just quickly to mention. You might know Cloudflare. Their CTO, John Graham Cumming, he's a Brit, and he's moved to Portugal probably 2 years ago. And it's also one interesting story. They are investing, they are hiring a lot of people here. This is obviously one of the things they highlighted when they choose Lisbon particularly, is the attractive immigration policy, political stability, and standard of living. But let me get to something that possibly is, from my experience, the big, you know, misalignment that I've seen talking with a lot of business owners, particularly in the UK, is costs of employment. So when you think having a company here, okay, so what will that cost? And because some possibly of you have come to Portugal on a touristic trip, and you can find that first, I don't know, like beer is very inexpensive, accommodations can be quite affordable. I feel, and again, my sample of people I've been talking to, that you think that prices of talent, particularly tech talent, will be quite affordable as well. I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's definitely not as cheap as some of you might think. Portugal, because it does have very good talent, and because it's not also the, you know, the hugest country in the world, salaries are not that low. So that is a big misconception I've been finding. So if I would like you to take anything out of this call, is do your homework, understand the price, so that you don't get very, you know, low expectations in terms of what you get. You'll get this. This is a very good summary. Also, a second piece of advice: be very, very aware of some information about salary benchmarks that you'll find online in Portugal. My experience of being over 15 years in the field is that most of them are simply wrong, either because they are self-reported or because Portuguese people sometimes don't like to say exactly what they make, or don't count, you know, that extra benefit that is not gross salary, but that is obviously cost of employment, right? So take that into consideration. There is a bias in a lot of these studies downwards. So then when you get to the country, the expectation that you can hire a team of professionals for that price, that does not match reality. These salary benchmark, obviously from a slightly bigger company, Robert Walters, will give you what I believe is a much more aligned estimation of gross salary. But on top of it, and by the way, this could be relevant, obviously, business owner, or if you are in any of these jobs, this is pretty much what you can expect being on Portugal. I'll go quickly now through taxes. Well, hopefully I don't say anything wrong here, but really briefly about what to expect in terms of employment taxes and how things work. So first of all, base salary. In Portugal, we have 14 months, okay? So not 12, not 13, 14 officially. Yes, you can divide it in 12. That was a piece of legislation that passed, 9 years ago when Troika was here. But typically, you take the gross salary, divide by 14, and that's the monthly gross salary. The second thing is we have a meal allowance typically. This is paid on top of gross salary. The value can vary a bit. I believe it can go all the way to 7 something, exempt from tax if you use a meal card provider, which is like a prepaid card that you need to use. Anyway, gross salary, meal allowance, small amount, typically for buying lunch, and you pay it for working days, not vacations, not the weekends, not holidays, just working days. Now, getting to the employer fees and recommended perks, also that we see being very, very, very common in the tech industry. So the employer, on top of gross salary, has the social security contribution, which is 23.75%. Then there is compensation funds additional, which is 1%. Then you have mandatory labor insurance. You need to have a medical examination of all your employees before they start. You also need to provide mandatory training. This training needs to be from a training agency that is recognized by the Portuguese authorities. In the case, DGERT, long name, doesn't matter, but it needs to be certified. So it's not just, you know, AWS certification. No, it needs to be something recognized locally. And what we also see being fairly common, although we do have a public health system, which is, well, fairly universal and decent, it is quite common to have a private health insurance as well. Costs here for a year, you'll see about 40 euros per month. So just north of 500 with all the fees and small fees and taxes per year. So this is obviously above gross salary. And so just to wrap up, for this benchmark of 50K, all the legal obligations mentioned, benefits and allowances and so on, about 60K or 67K in total employment costs. Please note, this not includes working tools or workspace, office, or anything like that, if you do still decide to have a working space. And lastly here, just a notion that Portugal does have a progressive income tax. So higher salaries are subject, obviously, to a higher percentage of the tax. And the net amount also depends on civil status and number of children. So just a table here for you to have an idea. Obviously, higher salaries do imply a lot of taxes. It is to be expected. Another quote, I'll skim through that. Last slide here. I want to be on time. Takeaways, right? So a little bit of information about why Portugal is great. We see all the people coming in. The country is very welcoming. Culturally speaking, we are very aligned with Western culture. Portugal and the UK have very long tradition of being an allied, right? And that transpires, right? I see North American companies, UK companies, they feel at home here, right? It's not a different mindset, a different culture, very easy. The talent is very good. Do not come to Portugal expecting to hire cheap talent. You'll get good talent, you will not get the cheapest talent in Europe. If you go Eastern, you will be cheaper for sure. The location is very good. If you will also consider about you being here, obviously, the quality of living and all of that is great, and everything about stability, stable, safe democracy, very high human development index, that's also quite important. So that's basically it. You'll have my contacts in the end. And I guess, Rui, that's all for us.
Thank you very much indeed, Pedro, for your valuable inputs. Very assertive, very well-balanced presentation, not hard selling Portugal at all, doing very, very low key. And no doubt that that Bridging can provide massive help and assistance to decentralize operations that are planning to create flexible talent pool out of Portugal. This was most helpful, indeed most helpful. Now to wrap up our panel, I would summon DIOGO Marques, who has brought us, I believe, a pre-recorded presentation on healthcare insurance, life insurance, and pension funds, right, DIOGO? So yes, please guide us through the key issues concerning the insurance territory, please, DIOGO.
Sure. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to first thank BPCC for putting together this webinar. I'll now share a video with you with some key point assets in regards to insurance. So just bear with me a minute here. Hey everyone, my name is DIOGO. I'm a life insurance advisor, head of Group Marques Vida, or GMSV for short. In the time we have today, I'll address some common practical situations so you can have these taken care of in your business and everyday life. Later on, if you have more specific questions, we can delve into these in more detail. I'll also share the link to this presentation with BPCC. So let's get started then. The general concept of insurance is to have in exchange for a small amount of premium paid out to the insurance company, a disproportionate amount of coverage in return in form of capital, services, or a mix of these in case of any event insured under the contract happens. So essentially you pay a small fee and get lots of money in return to cover a specific situation. Hand in hand as the advisor you work with. If you are looking to take care of something that is more price-related, commodity-like, you probably don't need an advisor at all, as you can pretty much do the whole thing online. But if you are looking for more specific situations tailored to your needs, making sure all are fitted to your specific situation, you'll pay, as you are looking for an expert in a specific field. It's a bit like the general practitioner and a heart surgeon. So it comes down to risk, reward, and advisor. Getting this concept is clear and essential, because if you look at insurance as something you have to have because it's mandatory, without getting clear on why it is useful, most likely you will be looking at pricing only. What's the point of it, right? Whereas if you look at insurance as a form of mitigating risk in your line of work and everyday life, you'll start looking at this differently. So given that different people have different sets of circumstances and realities, I'll go through 4 examples so you can get a better understanding of this concept. We'll do this together. Example number 1. Inheritance tax with non-habitual residents and golden visas. At the time of this presentation, the UK has a 40% inheritance tax charged on any amount of estate above 325k. So you take out a life insurance policy to be paid out to cover this amount. What most people are not aware of is that if they move here, there are a lot of insurance carriers that will not cover the risk anymore because the insured changed its fiscal residency. But since they don't inform the carrier and keep paying the premiums, they are essentially wasting money. The solution to this, starting by first knowing if you are insured or not, is to work with an IFA. It's an independent financial advisor using an international carrier that also has a branch in the country you just move into. Before taking out a policy, you are asking first to have this risk covered. That way, when the policy is issued, you'll know you are covered because you asked to get the specific point covered. The second example are solopreneurs. This entails a concept called keyman insurance. A good example of a keyman insurance is a specialist like a really good realtor. Let's say she makes 5 million a year in sales. One day while on the phone, she gets into a car accident and doesn't work for 10 months as a result. How is she going to bring in 10 months worth of deals and revenue? She's losing money by not being able to sell because she got herself into a car accident. The way to solve this is to have an income protection policy that is triggered in this specific event, as the income protection component pays you while you are not working. In addition, you can subscribe to additional riders like critical illnesses support, telemedicine consultations, delivery of medicine to your home, nurses and physical therapists to your home, duplication of capital, and much more. These are some examples, as there are a ton of them. The third example are limited partnerships. This entails a concept called buy-sell agreements. This is a situation where you have multiple people in a business partnership. The problem arises when one of them dies, and by default in Portugal, their next of kin will inherit their common stock. If the deceased had enough weight in the company, the new owners step in and might start ruining everything. No checks are signed and they want to sell for an absurd amount, so essentially throwing a monkey wrench in the whole venture. The solution seems to be to buy them out, keeping the control within the founders. The question is, where will the money come from? Selling assets, bank loans? Well, not really. So how then? By the use of a life insurance policy paid out to the company. The company is the beneficiary and the partners are the insured. There is a bit more paperwork added to the policy, namely the valuation of the company. Other than that, that's pretty much it. The company gets paid, the accountants do all the back office work. Partners use this money to buy out the stock from the inheritors and will keep the control of the company. The fourth example is what I call money on the side businesses, like VC-backed tech companies or more established companies in other industries. To illustrate this point, we will use a tech company as an example. Let's say the founding partners are more sales and marketing oriented and need a technical oriented side to the equation. So they bring in a tech-savvy talent like a computer science PhD of a sort. They want to retain her talent by offering her stock in the company, but she doesn't have the money to buy the stock. So at this point, she's more like an employee. She needs their sales, they need her tax expertise. So essentially, she has a vested interest as she will commit her efforts by applying her specific knowledge, developing the tech part of the company. But the founding partners like her want her to be a partner in the venture. So it's a lack of money problem. How do you solve this? By the use of life insurance in the form of fringe benefits to fund the stock options. At the present moment, the company pays her income plus a part in fringe benefits. The fringe benefit part is the insurance company premium. When maturity is reached, let's say 5 years, the face value of the policy is paid out to the company. Let's say it's 100k. This amount will be used to fund the stock options of the technical officer, bringing her on board. The company stock is a bit more diluted, but she's now on board. Variations of this can be used, like pension plans, profit-sharing programs, and more. In the last 4 examples, we went through some situations of using a life insurance policy and some of its additional riders. In this last part, I want to cover some key aspects in regards to life insurance and carriers, as this makes all the difference. So essentially, a life insurance policy has 3 main components. Number 1, payment in case of death. Number 2, payment in case of disability or illness with additional services. Number 3, as an investment by using its guaranteed cash value from the insurance carrier. Some common pitfalls in regards to life insurance carriers. One important point to life insurance policies is the age range at the inception of the contract, from the underwriting part of it and for the lifespan of the whole policy. In Portugal, most carriers stop covering you when you reach 70, which for me is nonsensical, as life expectancy is getting longer. So they are essentially expecting you to outlive the policy and not paying any claims, which doesn't serve clients at all in my perspective. The other thing they do is to limit the amount of coverage. If it is higher than 100k, most will start throwing the book at you, asking for way too many medical exams and financial reports. This is where the advisor you pick comes in handy, as the good ones knows the contracts from each carrier blindfolded and what each offers, and can help you choose the best one since they are independent. As an example, currently, there are options in place in Portugal that will get you covered for more than 10 million with customized options and extended coverages all around the world until you are 85 and more in some cases. I just want you to make a good point of this, as this is where you get more value from your advisor's expertise, as your advisor can cherry pick the best coverages from each carrier and bring those into the plan, so it serves your interests first the best and not the carrier's ones. So this wraps up this presentation. I just want to re-emphasize the importance of you start looking at life insurance as an asset to your business and asking you to see where are some situations that you can use it so you can financially protect what you have built so far. Thank you.
Thank you, Diogo, for your presentation, which no doubt comprehensively covered all of the complexities and options that one has concerning protection and risk management. At least that's how I look at when I discuss insurances. So thank you very much for that.
Sure, of course, my pleasure.
Now we are fast heading towards the close of this webinar, but we do have time for a couple of questions, and I would like to share with our panel the questions, and please do feel free to reply in accordance with your knowledge and area of expertise. I would not be surprised if Aline is put on the spotlight here, because taxes is always everyone's favorite, I think. So we have a question here on whether, from Michael Froels, I'm not sure the surname, I'm spelling the surname correctly, but his question is on whether US citizens or green card holders would be excluded from the NHR regime.
Not at all. So US citizens can also benefit from the non-habitual resident regime. The issue is more on the US end of the question, as if you are a US national or a green card holder, you continue to pay taxes normally in the US. So from a Portuguese perspective, generically, it is possible to consider that because you are US national and you continue to pay taxes in the US in accordance with domestic law and also with the treaty, to have a position that your income may benefit from an exemption in Portugal. So ultimately, the only tax payable would be the taxes on the US side and not in Portugal. But again, this is really a very generic remark, and we always need to address each type of income individually and to determine the treaty rules applicable to each specific case.
Thank you very much, Aline. Absolutely, absolutely. Obviously, all these questions have to be answered in a very generic way, and we know that the devil is in the details, so we do have to dig into the particulars of each situation. Having said that, Keith asked us whether, I think you mentioned that some types of dividends and interests could be reclassified as investment income and taxed accordingly. So Keith is raising a question on whether there is any way we can typify such kind of dividends and interests.
Again, and I apologize to give it a typical consultant answer, which is depends.
Depends.
but it's absolutely true. So we always need to understand the nature of each payment and to check if there's a treaty in force between Portugal and the country of source. If the rule on the qualification of income in that treaty would cover different types of payment or would treat different types of payments as an interest or as a dividend. There are treaties that do establish that any income qualified as a dividend in the country of source would continue or should continue to be qualified as such. So it would not be seen, for instance, in taking the same example that I mentioned in the presentation. So if you have a distribution from a participation unit from a fund, there are countries that treat this type of income as a dividend. And there are treaties that state that you should continue to follow the qualification of the income as in the country of source. So for those countries, we would be able to continue to treat that income as a dividend. But for others, if we don't have that rule, we wouldn't be able to do so. So it's always necessary to understand the source of the income, whether there's a treaty, or if not, if we will only apply the Portuguese domestic rules.
Thank you very much, Aline. George, I've got a question here for you from Derek Sprackett from Arcades. Derek is wondering whether a lump sum with enough funds in a bank could be acceptable for a D7 visa. You're on mute.
Okay, now, thank you for the question. Yes, this is one of the most common documents that we present at the consulate and at the Portuguese Immigration Office, because as I mentioned, this is a two-step procedure. And this is, of course, the most common document that we present, the bank statements. Okay, so there are a lot of other documents, like I mentioned, the pension documents, proof of income, tax return, if the rental income, well.
Okay, so lump sum would do, as long as you can prove that you have a lump sum in a bank statement, that's okay.
That's okay.
Brilliant. There's an easy one for Pedro. Let me see. An easy one for Pedro. Wahib Malti is asking whether there is a one-stop shop where that they can contact with questions relating to relocating a business in Portugal and relocation in general. I think Bridging probably could suffice in this field, right, Pedro? You're on mute. Oh, I can't unmute you. Elena.
Okay, now I'm on. Thank you. No, indeed. So that's exactly what we do. Indeed, right? So we work. Obviously, if you want someone that is a tax, we know a bit about tax. We know a thing or two about legal, but you have the expertise for that. What we do more than that is go with you you know, going through the places, doing everything. So you can think of bridging from a business perspective, almost like your interim country manager. Okay?
So you basically do the market inception, right, into the country, and then obviously then you find the partners which you need to address other issues.
Exactly right. Exactly right. And there's a lot of stuff, particularly if you don't speak Portuguese. Portugal, even the government has been doing a lot of great steps to have the official documentation in English, but it's still not everything in English, obviously, right? So just receiving letters in the mail in Portuguese can be, well, you know, hard if you don't speak the language, right? So it's that type of support, really daily support if needed, that we can do. And absolutely feel free to reach out. I would love to talk.
Fantastic. Diogo, in Portugal, we do have a perception that we only go for insurances when it's mandatory. It's kind of a Portuguese habit, isn't it? What do you find from a foreign outlook? I mean, when people come to Portugal, what sort of type of insurance coverage are they looking for? What's your experience on this field?
Yeah, you bring up a good point, because I think it's mostly a cultural thing. Because when you address people that are coming in from different countries, actually there are studies from actuarial groups that delved in deeply into this matter. And they found out that essentially Portugal is exactly like you're saying. It's a bit more like pricing oriented. I have to have this. And I find that when the business owners, they are investing in all that, when they're coming here, they're a little bit more sensitive into risk management. This is why we put up this presentation, as I feel it addresses some common pitfalls, and this is where we can be more effective, because we have done this for a while now.
Brilliant. Okay. I think I've got a last question for Aline. It's from Sergey Selivanov, and he's asking, Sergey is asking, he's saying that his tax advisor in the UK says the income from rented property has to be paid in the country of its location. Well, you said that the rental income from properties abroad, once you are resident in Portugal, is exempt. Can you clarify that, Aline? Please?
Absolutely. So that's a brilliant question. So the description that I've made of the tax regime is strictly from a Portuguese perspective. So the rental income is indeed exempt in Portugal, but it can be taxed in the country of source, so where the property is located. So if you have a property in the UK rented out, you will be paying, or in theory, it is liable to tax in the UK, as in any other country. So typically, properties do pay tax in the country where they are located. So, and going back to my initial comment, so all that I've described is strictly from a Portuguese perspective. So I did not address the taxation at source because it is country specific. And even though treaties may say that one country may tax a specific type of income, it is a country's political decision whether or not to effectively tax it. So it always has to, it has two sides to the same coin. So taxes in the country of source and taxes in Portugal. So although we say that on the one side of the coin that there is no tax in Portugal, we always need to see what's on the other side of the coin.
Fantastic. Now, I do think that we're about time. We don't have more questions, so I think we have to call it a day. As it is already 11:15. For those of you who are in need of further assistance, we do encourage you to visit the Chamber's online directory of members on the webmail, on the web address that's been provided on the chat room, where you can filter through the search based on area of activity, geographic location, and also to contact any of our speakers today who have gently made themselves available to reply privately to any outstanding questions. As we mentioned before, some of these are very, very specific. You do have to look very carefully at the specifics of the situation. It was an immense pleasure to be with you this morning, and I would like to thank all of our speakers and all of our members, Deloitte, CTSU Deloitte's Legal Practice, Bridging, and Group Marques Gurus for sharing their knowledge and enthusiasm about Portugal. I think it was a very well-balanced perspective of Portugal, to be honest. We didn't do much hard sell at all. I hope this webinar did help you to understand the challenges of relocation and everything that it entails. I hope that many of you who are with us today will decide to move over to Portugal, to come to live, or just enjoy Portugal, all it has to offer, and to know that British Portuguese Chamber of Commerce is here always to assist you. So thank you very much. Bye-bye, and hope to see you soon.